Thank you so much for coming, and welcome to our second annual Women in Science and Engineering Forum. I'm Lynn Ericsson, the Executive Director and CEO of the Da Vinci Science Center, and I am thrilled to be here with all of you. There's a couple males in the audience, but I'm especially thrilled to be here with all of these women, young girls who aspire to change the world, and accomplished and distinguished scientists and engineers who are making a difference every day. All of you are responsible for the breakthroughs that are happening today and will happen in the future that will change some of our lives. I'd like to take just a few minutes, because I know we want to get to the panel, to thank the individuals who have made tonight's event possible. And then I'm actually going to turn the program over to Dr. Katie Warlow and Erin Armstrong, who are co-chairs of our Women in STEM, our Women in Science and Engineering Advisory Council. First, a special thanks to our panel, an incredible group of distinguished female scientists and engineers who in many cases have traveled a long way to be here with us this evening. I'd also like to recognize the staff at the Da Vinci Science Center who worked tirelessly over the last several months to attract this great group of high school students, college students, and faculty, and distinguished STEM professionals from the region. Would the Da Vinci Science Center, some of them are already standing, but would the Da Vinci Science Center staff please stand and be recognized, or raise your hands and be recognized? And I have to say, earlier this week, over 300 middle school students had the opportunity to spend the day at the Da Vinci Science Center and participate in hands-on activities and workshops led by female STEM professionals and college faculty. And that was a great event as well. And this incredible staff I have really made that happen. Finally, I'd like to recognize the presenting sponsor for tonight's event, Daiichi Sankyo. Our distinguished panelist, Vera, is here representing Daiichi. Trish, raise your hand. Of course, everyone can see you. They see your name tag, but we really appreciate your support. Thank you also to the many organizations here this evening who provided financial support to enable a large group of college students and high school students to attend the dinner that occurred before this event. The sponsors are listed in your program. Let's give all of our sponsors a round of applause. We're here this evening to meet a distinguished panel of female STEM professionals, leaders, working in a variety of industry sectors to learn, and we have the opportunity to learn about their career paths. The number of women employed in STEM fields is growing, yet men continue to outnumber women, especially at upper levels of these professions. Women make up 48% of the US workforce, yet only 24% of women are employed in STEM fields, a statistic that has remained constant for the last decade. In less than 10 years, the United States will need 1.7 million STEM professionals, additional engineers and computing professionals in particular. Women are needed to meet that demand. In addition to expanding the talent pool, as you will hear tonight, women's experiences, along with men's, of course, can and should contribute to scientific and technological innovation. Consider, for example, the contributions that women might make to the design of your next running shoe, or playground equipment, or the public water system, or a cure for breast cancer. The Da Vinci Science Center is passionate about supporting women in STEM fields and inspiring young girls to follow in their footsteps. This year, we established the Women in Science Engineering, or WISE, we call it for short, Advisory Council for that purpose. And here to tell you about the WISE Council and introduce Carmen Ambar, the moderator of our panel, are Dr. Katie Warlow, founder and CEO of Life Air Systems, and Erin Armstrong, Associate Director of Sterilization at B. Braun. These two women are the co-chairs of our Women in Science and Engineering Advisory Council. Katie and Erin.
Thank you, Lynn. We are thrilled to be here this evening and participate in tonight's great event. Before we begin, we'd like to thank B. Braun and St. Luke's University Health Network, founding sponsors of the WISE Advisory Council. They're providing the resources to support the development of the WISE Council, including a variety of programs and events that are planned over the course of this coming year. We're very grateful for the commitment by these organizations towards the advancement of women in STEM careers. In continuing, and as Lynn indicated, we'd like to take a few minutes to tell you about the WISE Advisory Council and encourage you to consider joining our great team. The WISE Advisory Council has two primary goals. One, to connect professional women in STEM fields so they can support one another as they advance through their career. Two, to advise the Da Vinci Science Center on strategies for developing girls' interest and achievement in STEM. The Council sponsors a variety of programs and events throughout the year that provide great opportunities for networking, as well as for mentoring young girls. There are no requirements to join. You can participate in the programs and events as you are able. Information on the WISE Council can be found on the flyer at each of your seats. We also encourage you to check out the WISE Advisory Council on LinkedIn. Regular updates on programs and events are listed there.
And now we're ready to begin the formal part of the program. Each of you has an index card. It's either in the bag that you received at dinner or it's at your seat. So at the end of the panel discussion, we'll have a few minutes for questions from the audience. If you have a question that you'd like to pose to the panel, please write your question on the index card and make sure your name is there too. Then when you're finished, pass your index card to your right to the end of the row, and Da Vinci Science staff members will be collecting those cards throughout the program. At the conclusion of the panel, those selected to ask their question will be called by name and given the opportunity to ask their question in person to the panel. So, finally, we would like to introduce Carmen Ambar, who will moderate our panel. Carmen has been the president of Cedar Crest College since 2008. Cedar Crest is a regional women's college renowned for its focus on developing female leaders and for its strength in the sciences. Cedar Crest College has been a very important partner in the development of this program, as well as the WISE Academy event for middle schoolers, which was held at the Da Vinci Science Center earlier this week. Thank you, Carmen.
So some housekeeping. If you can make sure that you put your cell phones on silence, bend down and do that now, okay? So as I said, I've been the president of Cedar Crest College. I'm in my 8th year. Cedar Crest will be 150 years old in 2017. And we have at Cedar Crest the audacious belief that the world needs more women leaders. And yeah, that's applause are worthy at that moment. And some of you may know that as an historic women's college, we've been very dedicated to helping young women persist in the sciences and to choose science and STEM fields as a career. Some of you may know that women's colleges have been doing that for many, many years and certainly have a strong track record in attracting young women in the sciences. Cedar Crest, for example, this past year, our entering class, 70% of our students indicated an interest in the sciences. And so we believe in this program. We know it's important for young women in particular to have images to know that what they want to achieve is possible. So here's what we're going to try to do in a very quick amount of time. We have about 30 minutes of questions with the panelists that I'm going to conduct, and then you'll have 30 minutes as well. We're not going to have them introduce themselves because we want to get straight to the question. So hopefully you've read their bios. If you hadn't, go read it, right, real quick. You are looking at women who are in healthcare, chemistry, biochemistry, nanotechnology. These are many women who have been first in their field in a variety of ways. The goal here tonight is to help you see yourselves in their journey, right? That what you want to achieve is possible, that it doesn't have to be a direct route, that it might be challenging, that you can change the world. That's the goal tonight. So I'm going to ask them a few questions. We've talked about these questions a bit beforehand, and they're going to weigh in back and forth, and we'll take about 30 minutes to do that, and then the floor will be yours. The floor will be yours. And it'll be your moment to tap into this expertise, right? To tap into what they've achieved in their careers so you can make sure that you step right in their footsteps so you can be where they are a few years from now. So we'll start in 2 seconds. So the first question is going to be for Angela and Aprille, and then if other panelists want to weigh in. One of the things that a lot of young women ask all the time is whether being a woman allowed you to have a unique perspective in your position. Did you feel like you brought something different to the table because of your gender? So, Angela, want to start?
Oh.
Or you want to turn it over to someone else?
No, I'll jump in. I'll jump in and take this one. Interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about that before, in particular, that being a woman would give you a different perspective. But I do think that's true. I think of one example, in a leadership role in an organization, you really have a perspective on talent and talent management and recruiting. You think a lot about it. You go to campuses, searching for that next class of executives that are going to rise within your company and be successful. And I think as a woman, you're even more aware of and notice what happens with every class, what you see, how many women are applying to join your firm. And I can certainly think of times in the past when there would be discussions for those of us who are part of the recruiting team about the fact that we wanted to see more women. Why didn't we have more women applying to join the firm? What were we doing wrong? What did we need to do differently? I haven't seen that at IBM. I mean, gratefully, I work for a company where our CEO is a woman, which is fantastic. First time in my career that I've been working at a company pursuing what I love, and my CEO is a woman. And I just can't say enough about how amazing that is. But I have in the past definitely brought a perspective, I think, that is informed by the fact that I remember being in that position, applying to work at organizations and seeing all men on the recruiting team, all men interviewing me, right? And I remember what that felt like. And I've been in a position recently and in my past now where I can make that a fact, to point it out, right, and take steps to address it. Yeah.
So, even diversity for an engineering team, that, if we were all cookie cutters, that we would not come up with unique and best solutions for something. We'd come up with the same solution every time, right? And in particular, when I work at a place like NASA, we always are looking for the most innovative solution. And I think that just in general, diversity helps to make that team better. It pushes them, it makes people think more openly when they hear a different idea. More so, as I've moved up in my career, my women's skills, or sometimes we call them soft skills, and they call them a lot of other things, have been more helpful. Because as I led big teams, I was considered the manager that was more empathetic. I mean, in getting any job done, and I've led teams from 10 to hundreds of people on a team to build a spacecraft instrument. And when I'm doing that, I have to be also sort of perceptive of when a person is having difficulty in delivering the product that they need to as part of the team. They may be things that are challenging at home. There may be things that they're just not as comfortable with moving forward. And I'm very much more perceptive, and it's kind of like Angela said, that I tend to pick up. I actually watch. I'm a watcher. Like if you go to a bar and my friends drink and I don't, I watch people. And so I actually learned also that could be helpful in being politically savvy as well, because you just pick up on a person's sudden change or shift in their chair. And those things are really important when you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars for a product that has to be done. If you're trying to get to Mars, you have a window and that window closes. And so it's very important to be perceptive. The other thing was the skill of being a multitasker. And I think that lots of women do lots of things, and we were talking about this, about how we come home and we've got to do dinner and we've got to do homework with the child and we've got to do this and that and whatever. And so being able to have a lot of balls in the air has actually helped me to be a happier person, but it also has allowed me to be successful. And now that I'm very broad and technically diverse, having those different aspects of being able to, look at different things and having that different perspective, but yet also being able to deliver has been very helpful. And I think that's sort of an innate part of me as a woman.
Right. Did any of the other panelists want to weigh in on that? Was there something else anyone else wanted to say? Do you want us to move on? Okay.
So in my field, which is malaria vaccine development now, the parts of the U.S. government that are most interested is the military and USAID, who I work for. Our focus is on women and children in the developing world. Obviously, the military part is protection of soldiers and travelers. But in writing clinical protocols and taking them to the field, taking to the developing countries and trying to get parents to agree to have their children submit to being a test subject, a volunteer, we have a lot of military outposts that run the vaccine trials for us, and they have physicians who are, I like to call them the 3 M's, military, medical, and male. And that brings a very specific perception of the world, which is very, very different than a mother who is trying to protect her child from malaria. And so many times I've had to argue with men who are also MDs, and I'm a Ph.D., and military, which is a whole other world, that maybe they need to put on the thinking cap of what a mother thinks when you are asking her to sign an informed consent document that all of these things might happen to their child without actually having a conversation with them first. So, I've been in a lot of situations where I've gone to the field and I've watched the interaction, and most times what I do is I grab, our nurse practitioners who are with them who are the same color as the mothers, who speak the same language, and I tell the medical doctor, who's male and white in a uniform, to go hide somewhere because they're scary just being themselves. But even me, not being able to speak the language, but being able, as a woman, to be able to say, I've done the research here, I would let my child submit to this. And you're going to be helping potentially millions of kids. It's a very different perception. I think there's so much that we have to remember as women that our customers are 50% women, sometimes greater than that. And a lot of times they're the decision makers in the household. So, I think it's critical to have female scientists, female medical practitioners available to bring that perspective.
Great. So I want to switch a little bit here to your technical backgrounds. So oftentimes I hear students say all the time, I don't want to be in a lab all day, or I really want to make a difference. Is this work going to make a difference in the world? So maybe for Ellen and Patricia, talk a little bit about how much your work requires your technical background versus other skills, such as relational management, emotional intelligence. Talk about that balance of using your technical skills, but also these other skills that you may bring to the table. Yeah.
So that's actually, for me, has changed a lot over the course of my career. So my background was in systems engineering, and when I first started out in industry, I actually used my technical skills quite heavily in my day-to-day job. I did a lot of analysis, did some computer programming, and a lot of comparison of results, testing, those types of things. What I've noticed is, as I went through my career, that has changed. My reliance on my technical skills hasn't changed, but the manner in which I use them has changed quite a bit. Now I use my relationship building skills and my understanding skills a lot more often and in a much different way. So there's a lot more political landscape that I have to negotiate. There's a lot more getting other people to understand what I need to do. And in the last couple of years, a new experience for me, so this is probably 2 or 3 years since I've started experiencing this, is I now manage teams that do things that I don't understand. And that was a really big, scary step for me. When my boss is the CFO of the commercial, US commercial Daiichi Sankyo, and she came to me one day and said, we're reorganizing the team and we're going to give you this job, and I know you've pretty much never done it before. And I kind of looked at her and I was a little bit afraid, probably a lot afraid. But what I really learned from that experience was I didn't have to be the subject matter expert. I had a team of subject matter experts, but my technical skills were then put to the test in asking good questions, making sure that I understood what the subject matter experts were doing so that I could explain it to upper management, and so that I could validate the assumptions that they're making and make suggestions and ask additional questions. So I went from really doing the technical work, to having to understand the technical work, even if it wasn't my area of expertise, which I think was a really important developmental step. And I imagine a lot of others go through that as well, in industry.
My experience was similar to Tricia's in that I started out early in my career using more of the technical skills, and certainly I did in the latter part of my career. But the interesting thing is I really felt that what I learned in engineering school was how to solve problems. That, the problem solving can take on a wide variety of different areas and aspects and difficulty, but what engineering school teaches you is a very methodical, disciplined approach to solving problems, and that translates across everything. And so building on that, and I think very much in today's day and age, it's a collaborative environment. You're working in teams. You have to learn, just because you might be the smartest person in the room doesn't mean you're going to win the day, because you have to work with the other people and work together with them to get the right solution. Because in engineering, it's interesting. People think, well, there's only one right answer, right? And the answer is no. There's a lot of different ways you can approach it, a lot of different ways you can go after it, and really building your EQ skills, your relationship management, is really important part of it. And that's experiential. And that's why they're teaching more in groups today than maybe they did back when I went to college. But I do think it's an important part both. Your technical skills give you the right to be in the room, no matter how long out of school you are. The fact that I was an engineer gave me at least the starting point to lead the DuPont company. And you build on that over time. But it is kind of the entry card into many different areas. And then what you do with it over time is going to be based on where your interests and your desires are. And are you an extrovert like I am? And I love the customer experience, so I wanted to go out and understand what their needs were and bring it back to the company. Are you more of a lab rat and love the experimentation part? And there's roles and places for everybody. But it's just making sure you build off that technical start is really important.
Great. So I want the panelists to kind of rewind, go back to your early days, right? Take some time to do that. But we're going to start with you, Anne, and maybe each of the panelists could take a little bite of this question. But talk about any challenges you faced in your pursuit of these technical skills, your STEM skills, that you think it would be important, particularly for the sort of starting students, college students, early career folks. Take them back to those challenges and talk a little bit about what you faced and maybe how you overcame.
Okay, so I'm a chemist, and I am in an area of chemistry. Organic synthesis was my training that is very male-dominated. And I feel very fortunate growing up because I had a lot of support from my parents, my teachers. There was never any question in my mind that I couldn't pursue a career in science. And when I got to Notre Dame, where I did my undergraduate work, I had the great fortune of working for, doing undergraduate research for Konrad Kowalski, who was an assistant professor at the time. And I would encourage all of you who are interested in pursuing careers in science to do undergraduate research as soon as you can. And it's really what turned me from being a closet pre-med into a gung-ho chemist. And I decided after probably just a semester of doing undergraduate research that I didn't really want to go to medical school, which is what I had been thinking I would do, even though I was a chemistry major, but I wanted to pursue a career in chemistry. So I continued to work in the lab throughout my undergraduate years, and then I was looking for a graduate school. And I remember when Dr. Kowalski was talking to me about where I should apply, and he said, don't even, I know you're a good student, don't even bother applying to Harvard, because there's no professors there that would take you into their labs to do what you want to do because you're a woman. So I was like, okay. And he said, go to Caltech and work for Dave Evans, who apparently would take women in his group. What I learned later was that even though Dave would take women in his group, he had never actually graduated a woman with a Ph.D. So I went off to Caltech, which was actually a really wonderful place to be. But after my first year, Dave went on a trip to Boston and came back, and I'll never forget this moment. We called it Black Wednesday. He walked into the lab, and I think I was the first graduate student he came upon, and he said, guess what? We're moving to Harvard. So I did end up at Harvard. Dave had another woman in the group. Bobby and I were the only women out of about 100 graduate students and PhDs doing organic synthesis at Harvard. When we showed up, the other graduate students were like, who are those new secretaries in the department? So it was a bit of a challenge, and I felt very isolated and very alone during those years. But I loved the science, and that was really what kept me going. Even though I really did not enjoy graduate school, I loved going into the lab, running experiments, learning new things every day. So that part of it was great. And so I persevered, and once I got out of graduate school, I learned that I went to work for Merck, and industry was a little bit of a different atmosphere from what I had experienced in graduate school, and I really never had any issues after that, even though I was one of only 2 women doing, at the PhD level, in a department of maybe 300 chemists doing medicinal chemistry when I got there. So the nice thing about that was that I was noticed. I stood out. It wasn't always a good thing because I felt a lot of the time I was the poster child for women in chemistry. But at the same time, it opened a lot of doors for me. And even though the doors were open, I still felt it was really up to me to show what I could do. So I don't feel like I got any special privileges, or people didn't make any kind of, special, they didn't really treat me specially, but I think because I was a woman, I was a lot more visible, and I was able to take advantage of that. So maybe I'll stop there. And
anybody else want to tackle that challenges that you faced, how you overcame?
I will. I used to be embarrassed to say this because, first of all, I'm really competitive. I was this kid who grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the projects, and was this stellar student, like just off the charts. So my mom stuck me on a bus, and I would travel every day with my younger sisters and a couple other kids in the neighborhood to a predominantly white school. But I always was still the top of the class. No matter where you put me, I did really, really well, special programs, and to the point when I decided that I didn't want to go to Stuyvesant, which is a big school, technical school in New York. I wanted to go live with my grandparents in Cambridge, and I loved Cambridge, Massachusetts. And she said if you went there, you couldn't go to the neighborhood school in Cambridge. You had to get a scholarship and go to a private school. So I did. And I went to a school called Cambridge School of Weston, which is somewhat like a liberal arts school. It's actually, I went to go speak at another private school not too long ago in Massachusetts, and they said, oh, you went to that hippie school? So it's really very much geared towards liberal arts, but I was this kid who'd always aspired and done really well in math and science. But it allowed me to grow and be diverse and sort of learn. I mean, I did pottery, and I drew, my friends would joke because I got to draw nude models in high school. Like, real nude? And yeah. So I had this very broad learning experience, but somewhere along the way, the teachers kind of forgot that I was the science, math kid. And finally, a teacher would see me every day. She would give me the homework. I'd go to the back of the class, and I would do my homework and hand it in because I had a really long ride home, and I wanted to get home and play basketball and do some other stuff. And what occurred was she said, she was an MIT grad, and she said, you should apply for this MIT program. It was for underrepresented cultures, basically African-American, Hispanic students. And I think you should try it. And so I did, and I got the bug. Like, I got all interested in aerospace engineering, and that's what I ended up doing. And then I did another program, and I got into MIT. But the one thing I didn't do before I left high school was actually have calculus. And if you imagine at a place like MIT, most kids are like testing out of calculus. And not only that, pre-calculus I took and pretty much taught myself because the teacher was sick and we had another student teaching the class. And remember, I'm this really smart kid. And so I had pre-calculus, analytical geometry, trigonometry, physics, and chemistry all of my senior year so that I could go to MIT. So you can imagine how ill-prepared I was for MIT. And by my third course of calculus, I actually failed it. And I'd never failed anything in my entire life. And then I made the mistake of taking it the next semester with all the math majors, and I failed it again. I just barely failed it, but I failed it. And so I had to, kind of regroup and realize, like, I'd never failed anything. So how do you get over failure? And so this was a huge task and challenge, but I had a mother who kept saying to me, you can still do it. You can do whatever you want. And I had an advisor who later became the Secretary of the Air Force, Dr. Sheila Whitnall, who said, I've seen you in class. I think you just need this math tool, and you can still do it. So I took a semester off. I went to City College of New York, and I got a 98 on the final. And then I later taught those classes. So I think I mastered it, but I want you to say that, when you see a boulder, sometimes it's in your way, but you've either got to go around it, you got to crawl under it, you got to figure out a way to get to your dream and your goal. And luckily, I had a mother who was riding that train with me all the way up to Harlem every day and saying, you can do it, you just gonna get this tool under your belt. And I had an advisor who was willing to. By the way, I had changed advisors because the male advisor didn't have a clue, and he was saying, this student can't make it here in MIT. But Dr. Whitnall, who I'm still friends with to this day, had the ability to say, you just need this tool. And math is an important tool in STEM, so you can't ignore it.
So I hope you guys caught all those nuggets in that, right? Mm-hmm. Because remember that one of the things that happens to young women in the sciences is that when they get a grade that they don't like, we are much more likely to say, oh, this is not for us. So one of the reasons why women don't persist in the sciences is not because they don't get similar grades to young men. It's just we're much more likely if we get a C to say, hey, this is not for us, right? So that's an example of someone saying, yeah, it is for you. When I think about the career she's had she not gone on right there, how things would have been so different, right? So that's just thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that. So let's talk a little bit about the work that you do that allows you to do good for the world. So one of the things I hear a lot from young women at Cedar Crest, if they're on the fence about all sorts of majors that focus on STEM areas, well, can I really do good? Can I really change? I want to change the world. I don't know if I want to do that, right? So anybody who wants to take this, talk about what you do that helps you have meaning in your job, that helps you have a sense that something is changing because of the work that you do. Whoever wants to take that.
Go for it. So I've always been very passionate about making the world a better place. And I think one of the most important things you can do is to find a career that really aligns with whatever your passion is. And so I was really fortunate to work at a company whose mission was to improve human health. So it fit very nicely with my personal mission. And I had the great opportunity while I was at Merck to lead a project that led to a marketed product. And not only did I led the chemistry effort, and the biology effort was led by Nancy Thornberry, who was a a graduate of Muhlenberg College, so not too far from here. She had a BS degree in biochemistry, and she, when she retired from Merck 2 years ago, she was senior vice president of diabetes research with a BS degree in biochemistry. So you can imagine what an amazing woman she is. And she and I were the first 2 women to lead a program at Merck that led to a drug product. And this was a drug called Januvia. You may have seen it on TV. I saw a commercial yesterday. The guys riding the teeter-totter, their blood sugar going up and down. So it's a drug to treat, to help patients with type 2 diabetes control their blood glucose. And I can't even begin to tell you how amazing it is to work on a project like that and to realize that what you did in the lab, what the people that you worked with did, has really helped millions and millions of people around the world with this terrible disease. So it's just been incredible. And it's also the #1 selling oral drug to treat diabetes. So it's been an incredibly successful product for Merck. It's our biggest selling product in Merck history. But I think for me, what's really important is just knowing how many millions of people it's helping. And it's really hard to get your head around millions and millions of people. But one of the most rewarding things for me is when I have somebody come up and say to me, I'm on Januvia and it's really helping me. So it's just been an incredible experience.
So I just want to remind you, I know another panelist probably wants to answer this question, but I just want to remind you it's now time to start passing your cards down so that they can select questions, because you guys are going to be up. It's your time now. So start passing your questions in. Where's Ann? Is Ann going to take those? Okay, you're all going to take those. So hands are waving over here. Oh, here, hands are waving here. So start to pass your questions. And I don't know, Lorraine, if you wanted to talk a little bit about, I know Lorraine, just so you know, to full disclosure, Lorraine is a Cedar Crest graduate and a member of our board of trustees, but I know what her work is, and so I know she wants to respond to this.
So as I said before, my work is in malaria vaccine development, and I also get involved in a lot of health policy for the State Department and the U.S. government. But that whole wanting to help society really shaped how I went about getting my degrees, because we were talking about it at dinner with some of the students, and I went to Cedar Crest, and I envisioned myself just working in a hospital lab, and one of the faculty at Cedar Crest said to me, you don't want to do that. And I said, no, I'm going to work at Allentown Hospital, and I'm going to live at home with my parents, and she said, okay, a guy comes in with, he's really sick, and you go down, you take blood, you run his blood work, and it's all wacky. What do you do? I said, I want to figure out what's wrong with him. And she said, it's not your job. You hand it to somebody, a doctor or a nurse, and they figure out. You never find out what happens to that guy. And I said, oh God, that is boring. I don't want to do that. So I decided to go to graduate school so that I could, sort of further my career and get into a better position so I could assist people. And when I was looking at different graduate schools, I looked at Harvard, hated it for many reasons. But one of the reasons was I would talk to people and say, I don't know if anybody went to Harvard, so I apologize, but one of the reasons I just came from this genetic engineering background where there were 6 women in my major, and we pulled each other through. And so getting to Harvard and realizing that they would sell their mother for a Science or Nature paper, and that even people in your lab were going to be your competitors and not work with you to solve anything was a difficult, I called my mom that night and I said, oh my God, that was the scariest place I've ever been in my life. And then I went to Hopkins. I went to Cornell Sloan Kettering, and a lot of what they were doing was working on oncogenes and trying to figure out how things worked. And obviously, there's cancer there as sort of the backdrop, but it was really so focused in and not diverse enough, I thought, of a place. But Hopkins was one of these very social environments, and there were people who were doing things that were much more applied. I mean, to work as long as you did on Januvia and see the success, that takes patience. I'm not a patient person. So I started working for a woman In biology, there's much more women than there, especially when we went to school, than there were in chemistry or physics. But she was working on vaccines for schistosomiasis, which is the second most prevalent parasitic disease, and HIV, which had just been discovered because I'm that old. And I thought, this is something really applied, you know, that I could see developing a vaccine and almost immediately seeing how it could help people. Now, those are two diseases that, I went to graduate school 25 years ago, that there's no vaccines for yet. So I wasn't intelligent enough to know that that is a very prolonged process. But I knew that I wanted to help people. And in my current job, being a malaria vaccinologist and going and trying to test our candidate vaccines in populations where we hope to use them one day, what I found is that even without having a vaccine that I could actually say to a mom, this is going to protect your child, just by being there, running a vaccine trial, we cut malaria deaths by half in a study population, not just the kids in our trial, but the whole community. We get them all vaccinated. We distribute mosquito nets so that the whole families are protected. We see an increase in numbers of, or decrease in maternal mortality, decrease in infant mortality, increases in education in women, in young girls. And we have found that by running these trials in these communities, and we can say to a mother, there will be benefits for your child regardless of whether or not they're actually protected of malaria. And you know, that's a very fulfilling thing to be able to do, to be able to, you know, have these mothers, you know, beg you to help their kids and not know whether or not the vaccine's going to help, but I know that because your child participated in this trial, they have a much more, a greater chance to see 5 than they did without it. So, you know, that in terms of bringing, you know, technical down to reality is really, and I've benefited by being able to see that hands-on. So I think that's where I'll stop.
Great. So now we have about 25 minutes, and it's your turn. So they've selected questions, I hope and believe.
We're still screening, but we have a few to start with.
Okay. So we're going to call your name. If you didn't hand in your question, go ahead, and they'll try to get you.
The young woman, I think her name is Electra. Electra, here you go. Where's our microphone? Where's our microphone? There we go.
Okay. I think that's on. We'll find out.
Hello?
Okay, we go.
What was the turning point in your life which made you decide to go into STEM?
Ellen, you want to take that?
Oh, I'd love to take this.
Okay, okay.
I can remember this, and I have to say I love Aprille's story. I have a similar one, a very similar one. But without going through that story, I remember when I decided that I wanted to pursue something in the sciences, something that would enable me to have impact in the world, change the world. And it was when I was in high school. And similar to Aprille, I didn't have the opportunity in high school to take calculus or a lot of the advanced courses that were necessary to go to the university that I wanted to go to, which was Stanford or Harvard. You know, I had big dreams. I was so motivated, but I was coming from a tiny public high school. And when I say tiny, I mean my graduating class was 29. 29 people, and not a nice private school with, you know, good funding, but a small public school. So for me to even be able to take physics, I had to find 5 other students who were willing to sign up, and I literally lobbied other people in my class so we could have physics my senior year. So I remember when I was in class one day, and was actually in that physics class, and the teacher, almost said professor, but the teacher basically heard that I was applying to MIT and Stanford and Harvard and a bunch of these universities, very competitive universities. And he teased me in front of the class that did I really think that I had any chance of getting in? You know, no one from our little high school has ever gone anywhere like that. And what was I thinking? And I remember sitting there embarrassed and thinking, oh my God, I could fail. What am I thinking going to these schools? And I got really angry all of a sudden. And I thought, I have a right to try this. If I don't do this, then every other student coming from this school is not going to try this, right? And that's horrible. How dare he? He's a teacher. He should be supportive of us, right? Come on. And I remember thinking that day, I am going to get in, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to tell everybody that I did. And lo and behold, I got accepted to lots of these schools, and I wrote letters with my application saying, I don't have the relevant background, right? I don't have the coursework, but let me in anyway, and I'll show you. I'm going to do something in my life. Must have worked because I got in. I ended up going to Stanford. But I did go back to my high school, and I told the students, like, you can do anything. And not to say it was easy. It was hard. I had a similar experience. I was not prepared, and I was competing on a curve. It's a big university, you're on a curve. I didn't know really what that would be like until I got there, and boy, did I learn quickly. It meant that I wasn't getting good grades, and I had gotten grades. I was at the top of the class until I got there, and I had the same experience. I thought, oh my God, I don't belong here, and I was lucky enough to have some wonderful professors that I worked with that encouraged me through that, and my parents. So I had a very same experience, and by the time I graduated, I was back at the top again, right? But I mean, it was difficult. But I remember that's when I decided. When somebody told me I couldn't do it, was when I decided I am going to do this. I'm going to show them all.
Okay, we're looking for Ava Finney. Could you stand up? She's 8 years old, so she might be a little low. Oh.
What kind of chemicals do you work with, and what do they do?
Oh, that's a good one. Where did she go?
So that is a very, very good question. And we work with lots of different kinds of chemicals. So in order to make a drug, you have to, it's like taking building blocks and building the molecule, putting different parts on it. Each part has a different purpose. So one part might make the drug really potent, so you can give a very low dose, and another part might make it work when you give it, or like if you take pills, right? Like swallow it, right? So you have to build all these properties into the molecule. And so we use different chemicals depending on what we're doing, lots of different chemicals, and we build them, we put them together to get the molecule that we want to make. Does that answer your question? Oh, we have another chemist here too.
So you got to give the other side. Medicine's getting a lot of time tonight, so I'm here. I'm here to speak for the industrial guys. So we use a lot of chemicals in my company as well, and they're building blocks, and we put them together in ways to create things like Kevlar, which when you create a bullet-resistant vest can help military people and policemen, be safe. We can turn it into a house wrap that makes your house more energy efficient, or a plastic that can lightweight your car and get you more miles per gallon. And so chemistry is really a neat science that helps you put things together in ways, and you can take that in you can make jet engines, and the rocket scientists here, and fuel, the rocket scientists here can talk about that. But the chemistry is one of the basics that really goes in a lot of different directions, and it's really an exciting field, and something that can create a lot of good things going forward in a wide variety of industries.
Okay, looking for Shannon Barco. We can merge on Shannon. Here's your question.
So you've given us some really great advice, and many of you have talked about the advisors and mentors that you have. So my question is, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever received from a mentor or influential person in your life?
So as you can probably imagine, we've all probably received lots and lots and lots of advice. One of the best pieces of advice that I still adhere to today, and I think I referred to it a little bit before, is to not be afraid to take risks and to not be afraid to fail. So, I mean, I know Angela and Aprille both spoke to that as well. Not everything's going to be easy, and a lot of the things that come before you, whether it be in school or outside of school, in your life, it could be in your job, it could be in your personal life, there's a lot of things out there that are going to be scary. And if you always take the safe route, you're going to miss out on a ton of amazing opportunities. So I'm happy to say I take risks all the time. Sometimes it scares me a whole lot and it's not very comfortable, but I'm always glad that I did. And even if it doesn't work out exactly the way you planned it to, most of the time you can say that you learned something from it. You might learn that you want to do the exact same thing again, or you might learn to never ever do that thing, whatever it was, ever again. But either way, you learn something, and I think it makes you a stronger person for the future.
I just want you all to notice that Patricia is the Senior Director of Risk Management.
This is true. The irony. Yes,
Thoughtful risk. Thoughtful risk. So we probably have time for a couple more questions. So.
Grace Edinger.
So, what were some things that you gave up to get to where you ended up? Like with all the activities in school, were there some that you chose that ended
I'm
to
gonna
a?
take that one too. So, just the other day I was doing an article, which was amazing that, I told you guys I grew up in the projects, so this New York Public Housing Authority reached out to me and said, you know, we want you to do this article. We have a newsletter and we want to inspire the girls in the community housing. And then they came back and said, we want to make you, after they read the article, they said, somebody else above them said, we want to make you the poster child. And they said, they had something like aerospace engineer, instrument manager, teacher, and it probably said something else like athlete. And then I said, oh, let's make it fun, right? Because I'm like T-ball coach, baseball coach, PTA president. I have been a faculty member. I've been a board of trustee member. I have been the chair of a middle school, and I've taught middle school in addition to college. And then I have been an instrument manager, aerospace engineer, attitude control systems analyst, and now I'm a program manager, also been a project manager. And so what I say is you can do it all. You just need to figure out how to be a good time manager. The one thing that I have given up, and as saying all that, is that I now teach at home because I have a 7-year-old. So I now teach in her class, and I do Hollow Steam Night, as I was sharing with people, but I have learned that I've transitioned somewhat out of the university, although I still mentor university students. So that's one thing that I've given up, and it's hard because I love to teach and I love to inspire the youth. You are the future, and I look at it as an opportunity to touch the future. And who could have a better legacy than that? I think we all are appreciative that you guys are willing to listen to us. The other thing is that I'm an athlete, and I mean like really good athlete, like beat the boys athlete from the time I was young, like, you know, really young, like that little girl over there. The bigger boys would pick me first over the boys my age. And so I played football, flag football, and competitively, and I'm MVP for my leagues and stuff like that. And then I did basketball, and I grew up playing with Patrick Ewing was a big basketball player for the Knicks, and then later, so I grew up playing with him. And then later, I did traveling softball. So I traveled all over the country, and I was able to play on a team that was ranked 5th in the nation. And over time, that takes a lot of time to be competitive, but slowly those things I had to let go a little bit, you know, and so now I'm T-ball coach and baseball coach, and I run the field with the kids, and then I talk trash when they're like thinking, you know, especially the little boys. I was like, boy, do you know how many trophies I got at home? And my daughter goes, mm-hmm. Yeah, so there you learn, and it's part of just sort of the normal course of nature. They're just things that you have to sort of let go and move on. And as you grow in your career, you know, that we talked about how some of us who are managers, how we have to leave the technical environment. And I really miss that, like the opportunity to say, oh yeah, I touched and built that hardware that's up in space. I mean, I love that part of my job. My job is cool. I work for NASA. And, but now I get to run teams and lead teams and, you know, from 10 million to 100, you know, to $500 million instruments. I mean, who could say that? And this current job I'm in, I get to infuse the nation's economy by helping small businesses do innovative projects and technology development for our country. And so you just learn that there are different seasons in your life and you have to transition. But in the beginning, when I was young, I just did it all, girl. I was like, all that. And a bucket of chicken. So you just learn how to be a good time manager. And you do the things that are priorities first. And then the other stuff will work. And those things were important to me. Sports was really important. We talked about stress relieving at our table. And those were really important. But I also learned about team sports and how to be a team player. And I have worked on teams that included other countries. I mean, the International Space Station took 17 different countries. And so there are lots of different skills that you get from doing the other things that make you well-rounded, that make you creative, and make you come to the table with a different way to solve a problem.
So we have one more question, and now I'll ask a last question, and then we'll go to our dessert reception. So.
Okay, I'm looking for Carolyn Brown, who is 9 years old.
Caroline. So it's Caroline. I think it's Caroline.
Speaking of, I know, I was like, look at it, she looked out. We can channel her. We call Caroline. Yeah, I know. Caroline. Like 16-year-olds.
Okay, you got it, Caroline. Go.
Yeah, go for it.
How do I become a great engineer?
Wow.
Great engineer. Who's going to take it?
So I think the first thing, and I actually think, Ellen, you spoke to this exactly before, is you have to want to solve problems. That's the most important thing. And other than that, I think if you're curious and you want to ask a lot of questions, and always work hard. I think that would pretty much sum it up from my point of view.
So I think that applies to a lot of different jobs, right? Working hard. So I often tell students that, first of all, you have to decide what you're passionate about, because most of us work more than 40 hours. So you definitely have to want to do this and love it. There are going to be times when it's tough, but you have to have good math skills, good science skills, good reading skills, and good communication skills. Because if I come up with an idea, if I come up with a patent, if I come up with something I need funded, I've got to go and talk about it, and I've got to be able to sell that idea. And many people forget that in engineering, that you don't always come to the table with a whole lot of money, right? You know, I mean, you got to get investors. And so those communication skills become really important. But when I work for a place like NASA, your tax dollars, your parents are paying taxes that help to fund our budgets. And I need to be able to tell you why that science is important. And we can have a long conversation, girl, why the science that I do every day is important. It's not always about the astronauts. There's a lot more things that we want to know in this world. And so you have to have those good foundation of skills, the ones that I talked about: math, science, communication, and be a good reader.
So do you like Legos?
Yes.
Do you like puzzles? That's a great place to start, because you start with some simple problem solving, and then with every grade you go on, you try something a little harder. So what's the next level up that you want to do? And so I think there's so many opportunities out there for kids that are your age to get involved in a summer program or a special camp, or, you know, other organizations like Girl Scouts do a lot with science and STEM engineering. So it's what you want to do and what makes you happy. And if you just keep building on your love of puzzles and Lego and things like that, you'll get there. You will.
I'm gonna throw one other thing in there. It may sound odd, but I really think it's true. So many of my friends who have a science and technology background also pursue music. And I think there's something really there. It teaches you, exactly, it's mathematical, it teaches you structure, and it just activates a different part of your brain. It's an interesting combination with science. So I would suggest pursue music, an instrument. Do you play an instrument? Excellent, excellent.
You guys didn't hear her. She said she's teaching herself how to play the guitar. So there you go. So last question.
I played the piano, so.
Thank you so much, Caroline. We appreciate it. So last question before our dessert reception. For anyone or for the entire panel, what inspires you? What inspires you? Because I think for a lot of the students and maybe some of the professionals in the room, they're trying to find that spark that helps them make that next step. And you've seen these accomplished women and what they've achieved in their career. There must be some things that are inspiring you to pursue what you're doing, or was the spark. So if you can give people a sense of what's inspired you to do this work, maybe it can help them find their passion as well.
Sure, I'd love to take this one. I have worked in and around healthcare for most of my career, for over 20 years. It's the industry that I love, even though I've touched others and worked with companies in other industries as a consultant in my past. But I truly love healthcare. It's the industry that we hear about all the time now, especially now, it's an election year. And we know we have challenges in our healthcare system, right? Pretty much everybody has a story about something either involving them personally or their family where things were difficult. Either it was hard to find a physician, or you know someone who's struggled with their health care, with challenges either with chronic conditions like diabetes or what have you, right? I love the fact that I get to work with this industry and try to really advance the science because it affects everyone, right? We are all going to age. We are all going to need healthcare in our lives. And so it's something I can wake up every day and be passionate about and know that what I'm doing is going to have an amazing impact, whether vaccines or curing cancer. It's one of the reasons that I actually joined IBM. I joined IBM in the last 2 years, so I'm fairly new to the IBMer community. I'm not quite bleeding blue yet, but I'm getting there. And I joined IBM at the time that I did because of Watson. You've probably all heard about Watson, a cognitive computer, a self-learning computer that IBM is using to pursue a cure for cancer, among many other things that they're using Watson for. But it's one of the reasons that I joined the company, and this is what I want my life's work to be, is to really see foundational changes in healthcare and a system that's more accessible, lower cost, able to more effectively deliver care, for all of us, not just in the U.S., but really around the world.
Anybody else want to take that? What inspires them?
So I already mentioned one, you guys. You guys inspire me. In particular, it's like renewed with having a 7-year-old daughter. But students have always inspired me. But truthfully, it's been also sort of something that I've just, as an African-American child, and looking at my grandfathers who struggled to be engineers, and when they went through a period of time when men that were educated as engineers were, working as the Pullman train, masters, or they weren't allowed to do some of the things that I currently do. And I said, I often look back historically at the contributions of the Nile Valley and the Egyptians, and looking at what Egyptians were able to do with no planes, trains, cars, buses, cranes, or anything, and these massive structures that aren't just burial chambers as they often are, but observatories that are more or better aligned with true north than some of our modern day observatories. And I say, if people of those cultures, even American Indians, people don't realize how scientific they had. And there are just so many different things that people have been able to do historically with so little compared to what we have. How could I not be a contributing member to society? How could I not take the opportunity to use the brain that I was given, the genes that I was afforded, to do something that would change the world? And I believe that every day when I talk to a student and inspire, I get a chance to change the world. But every time I get to help a scientist solve something, I work with Nobel Prize winners who were able to discover and to be able to confirm the Big Bang Theory. I mean, that's awesome. Like, gee, that's me. You know, I get to do these things. And so every day I'm inspired by the new content of knowledge that we gain at NASA, the ways that we're able to take our technology and help our communities, things that you don't even realize you're wearing. And I talked about LASIK surgery was developed from a technique at NASA. And Gore-Tex that we wear in our sweatsuits, in our shoes, and Timberlands and whatever, was developed from an astronaut suit. So if I have that impact, and I can see the challenges of the dollars that we invest in our own technology, and then you get to utilize it later in your cooking, where because of the ceramic temperatures now can be achieved for high rates on the shuttle, and then you can use it in your kitchen. I'm like, wow, what an impact and what a role I can play in life. So every day I'm inspired that we're able to impact you guys and help improve lives. And that's what an engineer does. That's what I truly believe. We don't just make these cool gizmos. We make things to help people in society have better lives.
Just, you know, when you think about 7.2 billion people in the world, and we all don't get along all that well together, and you think about every projection has it going to 9 billion people by 2050. So that's 9 billion people we have to feed. That's 9 billion people who want communication capability, they want a safe place to live, they want energy for their homes, for transportation, and the world's getting smaller. And these are problems that we as a world can either create, you know, a lot of issues with, you know, greenhouse gas, you know, global warming, or we can have really great solutions for. And science and engineering is going to be the way that we're going to get from here to there and create a world for your kids to flourish. And, you know, it's a very important part of how we got to where we are today and how we're living so much longer today than we did 20 years ago. And, you know, and I think it's an exciting time to be part of that solution. It's what drove all of us to be up here today. And we're hoping it's what drives you to pick careers and pick an education and then careers in math and science.
So as Lynn comes up, I say this all the time to our students, there's a direct correlation between images and possibilities. And all of us need images to look to know that what we want to achieve is possible. So I hope you'll join me in thanking our panelists for being those images to know that what we want to achieve is possible.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. I know you are all inspired by these women, by their incredible accomplishments and their visions for the future and how we might have a better world. So we cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much again. Sure, let's do one more round of applause. I'd like to recognize more formally a couple of key staff and the AmeriCorps Vistas. So could Kate and Anne Marie and Kendra and Beth and Maria please come up? I'll take them. So first, maybe I'll thank, we have 3 AmeriCorps Vistas who are working with us here in the Lehigh Valley this year, helping to build a mentoring program to support mentoring of low-income youth and also girls. And so these 3 women are doing a year of service, and they've been an incredible support at the center, but also to tonight's event. So I'd like to recognize each of you. Thank you. And then the 2 women that really, lots of people were involved in this, but the 2 women that had their hands all over getting all of you here and all these arrangements and so forth for this event were Kate Popejoy and Anne Marie Sorobi. So thank you so much.